Hey there, and welcome to AI Storycraft. We combine AI-driven creativity with amazing, AI-generated images to bring you a unique, comic book-style storytelling experience. If that sounds like your vibe, or you're just curious about what AI can do, you're in the right spot. Let's dive into this episode's story, Hidden Agenda.
Gwen stood at the edge of the parking lot, the weight of her backpack familiar on her shoulders, though the world around her felt anything but. Code Light Technologies, a modest mid-sized company on paper, was her summer internship, an opportunity for experience, as her professors called it. They didn't know that she already possessed skills beyond anything Code Light could teach her. She adjusted her backpack again, feeling the comforting hum of the modified laptop inside. Her mind was a labyrinth of code and encryption, her fingers capable of breaking through firewalls and security protocols most professionals couldn't even comprehend. She was a ghost online, a legend in the deepest corners of the digital world, though no one here would suspect it. She scanned the building, noting the outdated security systems and flawed firewalls she could crack in minutes. A sense of calm washed over her. For Gwen, this was child's play, but she kept her head down, playing the role of a quiet, unassuming intern. As Gwen pushed through the glass doors, the cool air inside Code Light Technologies felt sterile, almost too clean. Her eyes flicked to the receptionist seated behind the sleek minimalist desk. The woman looked up with a practiced smile, polite but distant. Her nameplate read, Linda. "Hi there," Linda said, her fingers hovering over her keyboard. "How can I help you?" "I'm Gwen Norton. I'm an intern. Starting today," Gwen replied quietly, keeping her voice steady but not giving too much away. She kept her hands in the pockets of her jacket, her posture slightly withdrawn. She showed Linda her student ID from Willow Creek University that read Gwen Norton. Linda's smile stiffened into something more mechanical as she tapped at her keyboard. "Ah, yes. Let me page Marcus. He'll be your manager." With a practiced flick of her wrist, Linda paged Marcus and gestured for Gwen to take a seat. She didn't. Instead, she stood by the entrance, scanning the room, taking in the layout, discrete cameras in the corners, the placement of security doors, every detail filed away for later use. A few minutes later, a tall, lean man with light-toned hair appeared. His name tag read Marcus Holt. He had the look of someone who'd spent too many years navigating office politics. Hollow-eyed, but sharp enough to survive. "Gwen, right?" His voice was brisk, impatient. "Follow me." Gwen smiled and followed him down a narrow hallway that led to a series of small cubicles. The further they walked, the quieter it became until they reached an isolated corner of the office, far from the chatter of the other employees. He pointed to a small, cramped cubicle with outdated equipment and peeling wallpaper. "This'll be your workspace," Marcus said without much enthusiasm. "Not glamorous, but it's quiet. You'll have plenty of privacy." Gwen slid into the chair at her new desk, the worn cushions sinking beneath her weight. The cubicle walls felt like they were closing in, cramped, isolated, exactly how she preferred it. She pulled her backpack onto her lap and unzipped it, revealing her weapon of choice, a large, custom-built gaming laptop. The backlit keyboard flickered to life as she set it down on the small table next to her desk, the keys glowing in a swirl of shifting colors: cyan, purple, deep red. As she powered it up, Marcus watched her with mild curiosity. "I should take notes on what I learn," Gwen said, her tone flat as she adjusted the screen. Marcus agreed. "Yes, good idea." His eyes lingered on the laptop for a second, but he seemed more preoccupied with the routine of the day. "All right, let's go over what you'll be doing." He ran through a quick, dull explanation. Basic office tasks that the full-time employees couldn't be bothered with. Filing reports, updating spreadsheets, and entering data into the system. Gwen kept her expression neutral, but her mind was already elsewhere. This was the kind of work designed to keep interns out of the way. She nodded when appropriate, offering nothing more than polite acknowledgement. After a few minutes, Marcus finished his overview. He glanced at her once more before stepping back. "If you have any questions, just ask." Gwen gave him a slight smile, her fingers resting lightly on her laptop's keys. "Will do." As soon as Marcus walked away, his footsteps fading into the distance, Gwen's expression shifted. She waited for a moment, listening to the office hum around her. Then she tapped a few keys, her laptop springing to life in a way no one else could understand. Gwen's fingers danced over the keyboard, the colorful glow of her laptop reflecting off her focused expression. Within moments, a list of 5 names appeared on her screen. These weren't just random colleagues. She had been researching them long before setting foot inside Code Light. Sarah Kensington, Senior Software Engineer David Roswell, Head of Cybersecurity Susan Farrow, Research Scientist Todd Graves, Project Manager Clint Voss, Director of Operations. She launched her terminal, her heart rate steady as she bypassed Code Light's weak security protocols. For a company involved in advanced tech research, The layers of protection were disappointingly thin. Sarah Kensington was first on her list. Gwen hacked into the employee directory, pulling up Sarah's contact info with ease. Work email, personal email, even her home address. Moving on to one, David Roswell, the head of cybersecurity. Gwen found herself facing more intricate defenses. It was a challenge, but nothing she couldn't handle. She unraveled his encrypted files and fished out his phone number, along with access to his work calendar. Next was Susan Farrow. Gwen slipped through the network like a phantom, gathering Susan's data. She had 2 email accounts and a LinkedIn profile full of telltale details. Todd Graves, the project manager, was simple. His passwords were outdated, his information practically lying out in the open. Finally, Gwen reached Clint Voss. The director of operations was paranoid, his digital footprint minimal, but Gwen was patient. She poked and prodded until his private accounts cracked open, revealing personal emails and a cloud storage filled with encrypted files she would save for later. By the time she leaned back in her chair, Gwen had everything she needed: contact information, access points, and more. This was just the beginning. Gwen leaned forward, her eyes fixed on the screen as she zeroed in on the first name on her list, Sarah Kensington. The senior software engineer had a reputation for being brilliant, but something about her didn't sit right with Gwen. She began by hacking into Sarah's work computer, bypassing the weak encryption with practiced ease. It didn't take long before she had full access to Sarah's system. From there, Gwen used Sarah's personal phone number to gain access to her mobile device, syncing it to her laptop. The files began to flood in: texts, emails, deleted documents. Gwen combed through them, searching for anything useful. What she found was explosive. Deep in Sarah's deleted files, Gwen uncovered a series of documents that had been wiped from her computer, but not completely erased. They detailed sensitive developmental software CodeLight had been working on, prototypes, algorithmic blueprints, all top-secret material. But what caught Gwen's attention was where those files had gone. Sarah had been quietly stealing CodeLight's intellectual property and selling it to a rival company. It didn't end there. Gwen dug deeper into Sarah's phone and discovered a string of text messages between her and Leonard Braxton, the CEO of Quantum Dynamics, one of CodeLight's competitors. The messages laid everything bare. Sarah and Leonard had been setting up meetings to discuss the sale of CodeLight's most confidential projects. The texts were shameless, discussing payment arrangements and future deals as if they were planning a simple lunch. The final message chilled Gwen. "We'll finalize the deal when I get the last batch. CodeLight won't know what hit them." Gwen's lips curled into a tight smile. She had what she needed. Not only had she found evidence of theft, but she also had the CEO of Quantum Dynamics directly implicated. Sarah Kensington had no idea the noose was already tightening around her. Gwen's focus shifted to the second name on her list, David Roswell, head of cybersecurity. He'd be more difficult to crack than Sarah, but that didn't worry her. David might be skilled, but Gwen's talent far surpassed anything he could defend against. She began probing his defenses, breaking through encryption layers and security protocols that would have stopped most hackers cold. It took time, but eventually she breached his work computer and mirrored the data onto her laptop. With a few keystrokes, she accessed his phone, syncing its contents to her system. The digging began. David was meticulous, his files well organized and scrubbed of anything obviously incriminating. But Gwen was patient. She combed through every message and every document until she found what she was looking for. Buried deep within his personal computer was a hidden folder, shielded by advanced encryption. Inside were sensitive communications involving William Mercer, CodeLight's CEO, and Carla Donovan, the COO. David had been cyber spying on both of them, along with several board members. The folder contained private emails, strategic plans, and even personal correspondence, things no one outside the inner circle of the company should have access to. Gwen's eyes narrowed as she read through the files. David had been watching them for months, maybe longer, gathering sensitive information and storing it on his personal system. Why? That part remained unclear. There was no mention of extortion or selling the information. He wasn't using the data, just collecting it, as if waiting for the right moment. The implications were staggering. Spying on William Mercer and Carla Donovan, two of the most powerful people at CodeLight, wasn't just unethical. It was dangerous. Whatever David was planning, it involved a level of betrayal that could cripple the company if revealed. Gwen's peripheral vision caught Marcus Holt making his way down the path between the cubicles, stopping occasionally to chat with employees. His demeanor was casual, but Gwen could feel his eyes scanning the room. He was headed in her direction, the isolated corner of the office, far removed from the hustle and chatter. With a swift flick of her fingers, Gwen minimized the active terminal on her laptop and switched the screen to a pre-written set of notes she'd prepared for moments like this. The screen now displayed mundane details about project timelines and workflow, the kind of notes an eager intern might keep. She turned her attention to the outdated work computer in front of her, typing slowly, pretending to be deep in data entry. Marcus approached, standing just next to her. His voice broke the silence. "How are things going, Gwen?" She spun in her chair, offering a small, polite smile. "Everything seems to be going okay. I think I'm getting the hang of it." Marcus nodded, his eyes briefly flicking over her screen before settling on her face. "Good. I know this stuff isn't the most exciting, but we've all got to start somewhere." Gwen gave him a quick nod, keeping her expression neutral. "Of course. Just happy to be learning." Marcus lingered for a moment longer, as if trying to assess how she was doing, but Gwen kept her demeanor perfectly poised, focused, professional. After a moment, he glanced down the row of cubicles and gave a curt nod. "All right. Well, if you need anything, you know where to find me." "Will do," Gwen replied, her voice calm. Marcus turned and began walking back toward the center of the office, chatting again with employees along the way. Gwen watched him go, her mind already shifting back to the task at hand. The second Marcus was out of earshot, she exhaled slowly and turned back to her laptop. The facade had held. With a few quick taps, her laptop returned to its true purpose. She still had 3 names left on her list, and plenty more secrets to uncover. Gwen leaned back in her chair, her fingers gliding effortlessly over the keyboard as she turned her attention to the 3rd name on her list, Susan Farrow. The research scientist. She accessed Susan's work computer with little effort. Files and folders opened on her screen, but nothing seemed out of the ordinary. It was all routine. Research papers, project notes, lab reports. Gwen clicked through them quickly, growing more and more certain that there was nothing of interest here. Then she moved on to Susan's phone. Syncing the data to her laptop, Gwen quickly scrolled through messages, emails, and encrypted chats. At first, it seemed like more of the same. Mundane conversations, work-related texts. But then she found something that made her pause. A series of intimate, encrypted messages hidden behind layers of personal security. With a few keystrokes, she decrypted them, and the truth unraveled before her eyes. Susan Farrow was married, but she was also having an affair. The text messages were explicit, detailing secret meetings, passionate encounters, and thinly veiled promises. The affair wasn't just with anyone, though. The name on the other end of the messages jumped out at her: Todd Graves, the 4th name on her list. Gwen's expression didn't change, but inside, she felt a cold satisfaction. She quickly switched gears, hacking into Todd's computer next. Like with Susan, his work files were clean. Generic project updates, team reports, nothing out of the ordinary. But once again, the real dirt was in the phone. Confirming what she already suspected, Todd's phone revealed the same set of steamy messages, each one matching Susan's texts perfectly. They'd been meeting after work, sneaking around under the radar of their colleagues, and apparently Todd's fiancé. Gwen smirked to herself, thinking, a 2-for-1 special. She hadn't set out to discover an office affair, but it was leverage nonetheless. If this affair became public, it could implode their careers, their personal lives, everything they'd carefully built. With her findings on Susan and Todd stored away, Gwen turned her attention to the final name on her list, Clint Voss, the director of operations. If anyone in this group had the power to manipulate the inner workings of CodeLight, it was Clint. His position gave him access to the company's most sensitive financial and operational details. She sensed he'd be the hardest to crack. She started with his work computer, slipping through the layers of security without much effort. On the surface, everything looked clean. Emails were businesslike, his work folders filled with mundane reports, meeting notes, and budget spreadsheets. Nothing that raised any alarms, at first glance. But Gwen had learned that the real secrets were never on the surface. She dove deeper, combing through Clint's deleted emails and budget files, and after a while she hit pay dirt. Tucked away in old budget reports were hidden transactions, disguised as operational expenses, that had nothing to do with the company's projects. Gwen's pulse quickened as the puzzle pieces fell into place. Clint had been siphoning company funds for personal use, but it wasn't just for himself. The records showed money had been funneled to Susan, Todd, Sarah, and David. It didn't end there. Suspicious, Gwen hacked into Clint's phone, knowing that if there was more to find, it would be buried in his personal conversations. Her instincts were right. She uncovered a wealth of information. Clint had been using company funds to purchase an illegal drug called Serenity, a powerful stimulant similar to ecstasy. Not only was he using it himself, but he had also been supplying it to Susan, Todd, and David. There were encrypted text exchanges detailing how he distributed the drug during private meetings, keeping the transactions hidden beneath layers of fake invoices and false budget reports. The text revealed how Serenity was a drug that heightened sensory experiences, blurred time perception, and created intense euphoria, perfect for those looking to escape the pressures of their work. Clint had become the supplier for his inner circle, keeping them hooked and complicit in his scheme. Gwen's fingers hovered over the keyboard as the weight of the situation sunk in. Clint wasn't just embezzling company funds. He was running a covert operation right under Codelight's nose, and now she had proof tying Clint, Sarah, Todd, Susan, and David into a tangled web of corruption, drug use, and betrayal. Gwen's fingers moved fluidly across the keyboard, her mind now focused on uncovering every detail in Clint's communications. The data poured in, one message after another, each revealing more about his illicit activities. She was about to move on to another thread when a particular message caught her attention. It was from Sarah Kensington. The exchange was casual, laced with inside jokes and veiled references, but one line stood out like a flashing red light. Not like what happened at the New Year's party with that girl from the catering company. She continued digging, her breath shallow as she pulled up older messages between Clint and Sarah. There, buried in the archives, she found it. A sickening exchange referencing the New Year's Eve party hosted by Codelight. Clint and Sarah had both attended, along with other company executives. But the girl they were talking about, a young woman from the catering staff, had clearly become the subject of something far darker. Clint had written something weeks after the event, almost dismissive. "Don't worry, nothing will come of it, no one's talking." Her hands tightened into fists. This wasn't just about money or drugs anymore. Whatever had happened at that party, it was more than an indiscretion. It was something Clint and Sarah had been desperate to hide. Sarah Kensington sat at her desk, her fingers clicking away as she navigated through her usual tasks. Everything felt routine, mundane even, until her screen flickered. The normal interface dissolved, glitching momentarily before being replaced by something strange, something unnatural. A face appeared on her screen, pixelated in a bluish teal hue. It was cold and mechanical, its expression frozen in a digital scowl. Behind it, the background rippled like cyberspace, neon lines swirling in a dark, endless grid. Below the face, bold, glowing red letters materialized, spelling out a name that sent a shiver down her spine. Raven 404. Sarah's heart skipped a beat, confusion tightening her chest as she stared at the screen, unsure whether it was some kind of prank or a virus. She hesitated, her hand hovering over the keyboard. But before she could act, a new message began to type itself across the screen. "Hello, Sarah. I'm Raven 404, and I know what you've been up to." Her breath caught in her throat. Her eyes widened as the words continued to appear. "It seems you are not exactly a model employee." Then, without warning, several of her deleted emails and text messages flashed onto the screen. They were from Sarah to Leonard Braxton, the CEO of Codelight's rival company, the one she'd been secretly meeting with to sell company secrets. Sarah's stomach twisted, her shock quickly turning into panic. How was this even possible? She had deleted those messages, encrypted them, buried them deep. Her mouth went dry as the truth of the situation began to sink in. Someone had hacked into her system, found everything she thought she'd hidden. For a brief moment, she sat frozen, staring at her own betrayal laid bare on the screen in front of her. The name Raven 404 pulsed ominously, like a digital specter watching her every move. Gwen sat at her cubicle, her fingers lightly resting on her laptop's keyboard, eyes fixed on the screen. The bluish-teal robotic face of Raven 404 remained in place, unmoving, while she waited for Sarah's inevitable response. She didn't have to wait long. A new message popped up. "Who are you? How did you get those messages and files?" Gwen smirked, her hands poised above the keys as she typed back her response. "How is not important. It's why you should be concerned with." She could imagine Sarah sitting at her desk, panic etched across her face, her mind racing with the realization of how deep she was in. Gwen continued typing, her words methodical, every sentence designed to tighten the noose. "Listen very carefully. Get David Roswell, Susan Farrow, Todd Graves, and Clint Voss to come to your office now. You have 15 minutes or all these emails and text messages between you and Leonard Braxton will be sent straight to William Mercer. I believe what you've been doing is known as industrial espionage. That's not just your job on the line. That's prison time." She hit send and then, for good measure, added a small flourish. A simple, mischievous smiley face appeared on Sarah's screen, hovering in front of the ominous Raven 404 logo. Gwen leaned back, the tension in her shoulders easing as she watched her handiwork. She had laid out the trap perfectly, and now it was only a matter of time. Sarah had no choice but to comply. Gwen's heart raced, her pulse steady as she reveled in the control she held. She'd forced Sarah into a corner, and now the others would soon be within her reach. In a panic, Sarah typed out a quick, desperate message to the 4 people Gwen had demanded. "Come to my office immediately. It's urgent." She sent it to David Roswell, Susan Farrow, Todd Graves, and Clint Voss. Her heart pounded as she waited for their responses. the ticking clock of the 15-minute deadline looming over her. One by one, the others received the message, each of them startled by the sudden urgency. David was the first to glance at his phone, frowning as he read the short, cryptic message. His cybersecurity instincts kicked in, making him wonder what could be serious enough for Sarah to send such a panicked call. Without another thought, he stood from his desk and headed toward her office. Susan was next. She had just finished a call with a supplier when she saw her phone light up with the message. Her stomach flipped as her mind immediately jumped to all the secrets they were hiding. Whatever this was, it wasn't good. She grabbed her bag and hurried to Sarah's office, her pulse racing. Todd leaned back in his chair, eyeing the message with a furrowed brow. He hadn't spoken to Sarah much outside of work, and seeing her sudden, frantic message only fueled his suspicion. But he knew better than to ignore something like this. He closed his laptop and made his way down the hall. Finally, Clint, always calm under pressure, read the message with a smirk tugging at the corner of his mouth. But even his confidence was tinged with worry. Sarah wasn't the type to lose her cool easily. He pocketed his phone, his mind already spinning with scenarios, and made his way toward her office. When they all arrived, Sarah was pacing, her face pale and her movements erratic. The four of them exchanged puzzled looks, their usual guarded expressions faltering under the weight of her visible fear. David was the first to speak. "What's going on, Sarah? Why the hell are you so panicked?" Susan stepped forward, her voice sharp. "Yeah, this better be important. What's happened?" Todd crossed his arms, his brow still furrowed, while Clint leaned against the doorframe, watching her closely. Sarah's eyes darted between them, her chest rising and falling rapidly. She opened her mouth to speak, but the words stuck in her throat. She couldn't bring herself to tell them that they were all being watched, manipulated, that someone knew everything. Instead, she stepped aside and pointed to her computer screen, where the digital face of Raven 404 still glowed ominously, the smiley face lingering mockingly. "This is what's going on," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. The room fell silent as they gathered around the screen, their faces reflecting the same mix of confusion and dread. Sarah's hands trembled as she typed out the message, knowing there was no other choice. "Everyone's here." She hit send, glancing nervously at the others in the room. Almost immediately, the door to the office clicked. It wasn't loud, but the sound of the smart lock sliding into place sent a chill through the air. Clint moved to test the handle, his calm demeanor fading as the reality set in. None of them were leaving. "What the hell?" Clint muttered, stepping back from the door. His panic spread quickly through the group, eyes darting between each other and Sarah's screen. Before anyone could react, a new message from Raven 404 appeared on Sarah's computer. "Put this on the TV now." Sarah swallowed hard, knowing it wasn't a request. She reached for her mouse, but before she could act, David pushed her aside, dropping into the chair with practiced ease. "Move," he snapped, his fingers flying across the keys as he quickly tried to take control of the system. "I'm not sitting here waiting to get blackmailed. I'll find out who this is." David's confidence was clear, but the others weren't so sure. His eyes were sharp with determination, but there was an edge to his movements, as if he knew he was in deep water. He tried to disable the smart lock, overriding the security system, but no matter what he did, Raven 404 was there, cutting him off at every pass. The screen flickered as David battled with Raven 404, the two locked in a back-and-forth cyber war. Lines of code streamed across the screen, flashing red warnings as David's fingers moved frantically. Every time he got close to gaining control of something, Raven 404 shut him down with precision, like a hunter toying with its prey. "Nice try, David." A message from Raven 404 appeared. "But you're going to have to do way better than that." David's jaw tightened, his face growing pale as he realized what he was up against. He wasn't dealing with an ordinary hacker. Raven 404 wasn't just skilled. She was operating on a level far beyond anything he'd encountered before. His knowledge of cybersecurity was vast, but Raven 404 was something else entirely. It felt like she could predict his moves before he even made them. "This isn't possible," David muttered under his breath, sweat forming on his brow. He tried another trick, bouncing through the company's external servers, hoping to find a back door. But Raven 404 was always there, blocking him at every turn. "You're persistent, I'll give you that." The mocking tone of the message seemed to drip with amusement. "But I told you, you're going to have to do better than that. Now, Sarah, get it on the TV. You don't want to keep me waiting." David slammed his hand down on the desk in frustration, realizing he was outmatched. His eyes flicked to Sarah, who was frozen in fear. "Do it," he gritted through clenched teeth. He didn't want to admit it, but Raven 404 had him completely cornered. Sarah moved quickly, connecting the computer to the large TV mounted on the wall. The screen flickered once more before the Raven 404 logo appeared, dominating the room with its glowing face and swirling digital grid. The smiley face returned, hovering over the scene with eerie, silent control. The room was dead quiet as everyone stared up at the TV. They were trapped, locked in a room, with their every move being controlled by a faceless entity they couldn't even begin to comprehend. Raven 404 had them exactly where she wanted them. The cold, glowing face of Raven 404 remained on the large TV screen, looming over the room as the five sat in uneasy silence. But their phones buzzed all at once, the sound cutting through the tension like a knife. Each of them glanced down at their screens, and the room filled with gasps and curses as the contents of their private lives were laid bare in front of them. Todd and Susan both stared, wide-eyed, at their phones. Their secret affair, once carefully hidden, was now in the open for everyone to see. Explicit messages, incriminating photos, and hotel bookings all compiled neatly in the files Raven 404 had sent. Susan covered her mouth in horror as Todd shot her a look of both betrayal and fear. Clint, usually the calmest of the group, felt a lump form in his throat as his own dirty laundry came into full view. Company budget reports, falsified and manipulated, revealing the money he had funneled for personal use. Then there were the messages relating to Serenity, the illegal drug he had been supplying to Todd, David, and Susan. His palms began to sweat as his gaze darted around the room. David's face had drained of all color. He had prided himself on being careful, on hiding the fact that he had been cyber spying on the company's board members and executives. Now, though, his entire operation had been exposed, and there was nothing he could do. The sensitive files he had collected on William Mercer and Carla Donovan flashed on his screen, too detailed to deny. And then there was Sarah, staring in disbelief at the files of her own treachery, emails, text messages, and meeting details with Leonard Braxton of Quantum Dynamics, the rival company to whom she'd been selling classified code-light information. Her hand shook as she scrolled through the damning evidence. Her betrayal no longer just a private sin. It was laid out for everyone to see. The panic in the room was palpable, like a ticking time bomb ready to explode. Everyone exchanged frantic looks, each more terrified than the last, the reality of their downfall hitting all at once. Then, on the TV screen, a new message appeared, typed slowly, deliberately. "Do I have your full attention now?" The five of them froze, their eyes locked on the glowing red letters. The silence was deafening for a moment, before Susan finally snapped, her voice trembling. She pointed at Todd, her eyes burning with accusation. "You told her, didn't you? You said something." Todd threw his hands up in defense. "What? No, I didn't say a word. What the hell are you even talking about? Don't lie to me," Susan shot back, her voice rising. "You and I, She waved her phone in the air, displaying the affair for all to see. "You told her about this, didn't you?" Before Todd could respond, Clint interjected, his voice low and menacing. "Shut up, both of you. This isn't about some damn affair. Whoever this is, Raven 404, they've got us all. Look at what's on your phones." The room descended into chaos as the accusations flew. "How the hell did you get me involved in this, Clint?" David growled, his fury barely contained. "You were using company funds for Serenity? Do you have any idea what this could do to us?" Clint glared back, his calm demeanor cracking. "I did what I had to. You knew what you were getting into when you accepted it." Sarah stayed quiet, her mind racing, her pulse pounding in her ears. She couldn't focus on their bickering. Her entire career, her life, was crumbling right in front of her. All she could think about was the inevitable fallout. Prison, lawsuits, everything she'd worked for, destroyed. And all the while, the glowing face of Raven 404 watched over them, silently enjoying the chaos she had unleashed. They were trapped, every one of them implicated, with nowhere to hide. As the argument grew louder, another message appeared on the TV screen. "I suggest you all stop blaming each other and start listening. Place your phone on Sarah's desk, David." He glanced nervously around at the others, their eyes locked on him with a mixture of fear and anger. Slowly, reluctantly, he walked towards Sarah's desk and laid his phone down. Almost instantly, the phone screen flickered, and the TV lit up with a new message from Raven 404. "Good. Now I can hear everything you're saying. It's time we have a little chat." The letters hung on the screen for a moment, glowing ominously as the room fell into a tense silence. A chat about the company's New Year's party. The words were typed slowly, deliberately, each letter appearing with a mocking tone that sent chills through the group. "You all remember that night, don't you?" Susan froze, her face turning pale as she exchanged a terrified glance with Todd. Clint's eyes widened, and David shifted uneasily, his confident facade now completely shattered. Even Sarah, who had tried to maintain some semblance of control, visibly stiffened. "New Year's party?" Todd muttered under his breath, looking around. What the hell does this have to do with? But Raven 404's next message appeared before he could finish. Let me refresh your memory. On the TV, a new file opened and a video began to play. It was grainy, shaky, but unmistakably footage from the company's New Year's party. The camera panned over groups of employees laughing, drinking, oblivious to the fact that they were being watched. The timestamp in the corner confirmed it. This was the night in question. The group stared at the TV screen, frozen as the video played. Footage from the night of the company's New Year's party. The young woman from the catering company, vibrant and full of life, moved between the bar and the tables, serving drinks and laughing with the employees. And there at the bar sat all 5 of them: Sarah, David, Todd, Susan, and Clint. The timestamp on the footage showed it was just hours before she went missing. Raven 404's message appeared on the TV screen in bold, glowing letters. You all remember her, don't you? She went missing that night. A suffocating tension filled the room. No one spoke for a moment until finally, Sarah broke the silence, her voice trembling slightly. Yes, of course. The police questioned everyone at the party, but it was determined she went missing afterward. What does this have to do with us? A new message flashed on the screen, the letters slow and deliberate. I know her disappearance has something to do with that night, and I know at least one of you knows what happened to her. It's time to start talking. The room grew colder as the words sunk in. Sarah felt her pulse quicken, glancing nervously at the others. Todd shifted uncomfortably in his seat, his hands clenched tightly together. David, usually so composed, stared wide-eyed at the screen, trying to process what was happening. Susan's face was ashen, her usual bravado nowhere to be found. And Owen, Clint, he looked shaken in a way they had never seen before. Raven 404's next message was more forceful, a demand that echoed in their minds. What happened to her? Nobody spoke. The 5 exchanged uneasy glances, all of them trying to gauge each other's reactions, trying to decide who was going to break first. The silence was heavy, thick with unspoken fear. Clint was the first to crack, his voice low and shaky. He hesitated, glancing around nervously before continuing. I don't know what happened. I swear, after she left the bar, I didn't see her again. Raven 404 wasn't satisfied. That's not enough. I need the truth. David stood up, his voice sharp and panicked. We don't know. She left the party just like the police said. None of us had anything to do with her disappearing. Another message came through, this time more ominous. One of you does. And if you don't tell me the truth, I will. The threat hung in the air like a dark cloud, and panic began to creep into the room. Susan crossed her arms, her face tight with anxiety. What the hell does that mean? She muttered, her voice almost trembling. Susan looked down at her hands, her thoughts racing. She was beginning to connect the dots, beginning to realize what Raven 404 was after. It was after the party, when she went missing, she whispered, more to herself than to anyone else. But why does Raven 404 think one of us? Before she could finish, another message appeared on the screen. Because you all were the last to see her, and someone wasn't honest about what happened. Todd's voice broke through, rising in frustration. We were all drinking. She was serving drinks. She laughed with us. Then she left and we never saw her again. What more do you want us to say? The screen flickered ominously, and a new message appeared, sharper than before. The truth, Todd. At least one of you knows what truly happened to her. The group exchanged tense glances. Todd's eyes darted from the screen to the others, his face pale and sweat forming on his brow. He clenched his fists, trying to keep calm, but the pressure was building. David, his voice tinged with frustration, finally broke the silence. Why is this so important to you? What's your stake in all this? Before Raven 404 could respond, Clint, in an attempt to regain some control, scoffed. Yeah, what are you, some kind of avenger or something? You think you can just swoop in and play judge, jury, and executioner? The screen flickered, and Raven 404's response appeared in bold, menacing letters. I'm the one asking the questions here. I ask, you answer. Understand? The room fell into a tense silence, the weight of the message pressing down on them. Todd swallowed hard. His voice caught in his throat. Clint shifted uncomfortably, realizing they were no longer in control. Susan broke the silence, her voice trembling. Look, I met her at the party, yes. Afterward, I left with Todd. We snuck off together, I admit that. But we never saw her again. Honestly, I don't know what happened to her. Todd nodded quickly, jumping in to back her up. Yeah, that's all we know. I'm sorry she went missing, but I swear I don't know what happened to her. I don't even remember her name. If I knew anything, I'd tell you, but honestly, that's it. That's all I know. The screen flickered again, and Raven 404's message appeared. Her name is Olivia Ross. Her dream was to become a professional chef. A pause, then another message. I believe you, Todd, but I know one of you knows what really happened to her. Suddenly, 5 separate files popped up on the screen, each labeled with their names: Sarah, David, Susan, Todd, and Clint. Their darkest secrets, laid out in cold, sterile digital form. Then a digital clock appeared, glowing red, and began counting down from 30 minutes. The next message was short but chilling. You have 30 minutes to tell the truth, or these files will automatically be sent. David raised his hands, his voice shaky. Wait, let's just say one of us does know what happened to her, and we tell you. What happens next? There was a tense pause before Raven 404 responded, the message appearing slowly on the screen. Then I unlock the door, delete the files, and everyone goes back to their normal, mundane lives. Clint's face flushed with anger, his voice rising as he slammed his fist on the table. So what? All of this whole elaborate scheme, is because you just want to know what happened to some girl who worked for a catering service. What the hell is wrong with you? Are you crazy? Raven 404. His response flashed onto the screen. I told you her name was Olivia Ross. Clint, still fuming, spat out, Okay, Olivia, whatever. Another message quickly followed, icy and calm. Clocks at 23 minutes and counting. The color drained from Clint's face as he glanced at the timer. His anger faded into panic. No, this can't be real. Raven 404 next message came swiftly. Oh, Clint, you're the saddest one of all. A new folder appeared on the screen, this one labeled with Clint's name. He stared at it, his voice faltering. What is that? I know where you've been buying serenity, Clint. The words hit like a hammer. You've been buying from the Emerald Society, haven't you? I don't think they'd be very happy to find out you've been feeding information to the police department. Clint's face twisted in confusion. I'm not an informant. What the hell are you talking about? The next message from Raven 404 was sharp and cold. That might be true, but once they receive the folder I've planted on your phone, it sure will look like you are. A sinister, smiley face appeared on the screen, glowing with dark intent. Clint's anger flared again as he shot up from his seat, his voice shaking with fury. You can't do that. Do you even know what could happen to me? Sarah's voice broke through the tension, shaky but determined. Okay, listen. If I tell you what I know, this ends, right? Before she could continue, Clint snapped, Shut up, Sarah. Susan's eyes widened as she looked between them. Oh my God, you do know something. David, now visibly nervous, urged her on. Just tell what you know, this is getting out of hand. Clint's, his voice growing desperate, growled. We know nothing. The screen flickered again as Raven 404 messaged back. Oh, I think you do. Clock's ticking, 14 minutes left. David sighed, rubbing his forehead as the pressure mounted. I don't think we have a choice now, Clint. We're going to have to confess. Todd turned to him, eyes wide with shock. Wait, so you're in on this too? What the hell is going on here? What do you know? Clint, visibly panicked, shook his head. Nothing. I know nothing about this. Sarah, her voice cracking, jumped in. Clint, I'm looking at jail time if this gets out. David will be fired and blacklisted, and you could be looking at jail. Or worse, if those fake messages get sent to the Emerald Society, you know their reputation. Clint's face paled, the weight of the situation crashing down around him. Raven 404 message appeared again. Cold and unrelenting. We're under 10 minutes. Only 8 minutes left. Clint, his voice cracking, asked, You're going to delete those files, right? This ends? The response came swiftly. Yes, as I said, this all ends if you tell what truly happened to Olivia Ross. David shot back, frustration bubbling over. Why is this so important to you? What the hell is your deal? The screen flashed with large, bold red letters this time. I ask the questions. You answer. I told you that already. A new message quickly followed. 6 minutes. I'm not playing. All files will be sent. Sarah snapped, her voice rising in panic. Look, Clint, we're out of time. Just confess. We have no other choice at this point. No one in this room will say anything to anyone. And this all ends. Clint, staring down at the floor, swallowed hard. His shoulders slumped in defeat. Okay, he muttered, taking a deep breath. Here's what happened. David and Susan exchanged shocked glances, their disbelief turning to dread as they realized Raven 404 had been right all along. They hadn't wanted to believe it, but as Clint prepared to speak, one horrifying truth became clear. They did know what had happened to Olivia Ross. Raven 404's next message flashed ominously on the screen. 4 minutes. Tell me what you know, Clint. Clint, his voice trembling, finally spoke. Okay. Here's what happened. I tried to get her to have a drink with me, but she wouldn't because she was working. She did agree to have a soda while I drank a cocktail. So Todd exploded in anger. You what? Clint's face turned pale as he continued, his words coming out in a rush. I had David come over and asked for a refill of beer to distract her. While she was busy, I poured a small vial of Serenity into her soda. Susan gasped, her voice rising. You what? David glanced at the screen, panic setting in. Keep going, Clint. There's only 3 minutes left. Clint stammered, his breathing heavy. About 15 minutes later, as the party was winding down, she started to feel the effects of the serenity. She was dizzy, confused, didn't know where she was. I led her away from the party, down the hall to a conference room. His words quickened, spilling out like a confession he could no longer hold back. I messaged Sarah for the key code. I used it to open the door, took Olivia inside, and sat her down on the couch. She was out of it, mumbling about seeing floating teddy bears. Clint's voice grew quieter, his guilt weighing heavily. I told her to lie down, let it pass. I whispered to her, you need to be more comfortable, and then I began unbuttoning her shirt. I pulled it off. He went silent for a moment, the room filled with the suffocating weight of his admission. Raven 404's message appeared on the screen in bold red letters. Continue, Clint. I have paused the countdown at 32 seconds. But I will unpause it if you stop talking. Clint, trembling, continued his confession. I pulled her shoes off, then I fondled her. I lifted her bra and then unbuttoned her pants. I pulled down the zipper and slid my hand inside her panties, kissing her neck. She kind of came to at that point, but she didn't know where she was or who I was. She freaked out. The tension in the room grew unbearable as Clint stammered. She jumped up off the couch, yelling, completely panicked. I tried to calm her down, I swear, but she got scared. She ran to the door, opened it, and bolted into the hallway. I chased after her. I only wanted to calm her down, but when she saw me running after her, she freaked out even more and ran for the stairs. Clint's voice cracked as he continued. She was still dizzy and confused from the serenity. She fell. Damn it, she fell hard down the stairs. When I got to her, she wasn't moving. She wasn't breathing, and there was blood. Blood coming from the back of her head. Tears welled in Clint's eyes as he nearly broke down. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry, Raven. She was dead. I swear I never meant to hurt her. I just wanted to calm her down. Susan, Todd, sat frozen, mouths agape, staring at Clint in disbelief. Raven 404's message appeared on the screen once again, cold and direct. Okay, Clint. And what did you do with her body? Sarah took a deep breath before speaking. He called me Raven, just like they all do. I guess I've always been the one who knows how to fix things. When Clint told me what happened, I knew how much trouble we'd be in if it got out that we were bringing Serenity into the building. So I grabbed a couple of blankets from the emergency supplies cabinet and messaged David to get here as fast as possible. David hesitated, his voice shaky as he continued. We wrapped her body in the blankets and carried her out through the back doors. I went around to get my car. We put her in the trunk and drove to a warehouse by the docks. It was New Year's, so I knew no one would be there. He paused, guilt washing over him. We threw her body into the ocean. Raven, I'm truly sorry, but that's what we did. Sarah nodded solemnly. I stayed behind, cleaned up the blood, and locked the conference room back up. I made sure everything looked like nothing ever happened. Todd, horrified, shook his head in disbelief. Oh my God, I had no idea about any of this. Susan, her face pale, added, me neither. We just wanted Serenity to enhance the time we were spending together, nothing more. I swear. Raven 404 messaged, thank you for telling me. Sarah, visibly shaken, asked, okay, now you know the truth. Will you delete those files? There was no response. The room fell into an uneasy silence. For 10 long minutes, they all sat in shame and disbelief, the weight of their confessions hanging heavy in the air. No one dared to speak. Then, one by one, the files began to disappear from the TV screen. Their phones unfroze, and Sarah's computer returned to normal. The eerie face of Raven 404 vanished without a trace. Finally, they heard the soft click of the door as the smart lock disengaged. Gwen stared at her laptop screen, her face illuminated by the cold glow of the files from each person still in front of her. A slight tear welled in her eye, but she quickly gathered herself. With a sharp breath, she hovered over Todd and Susan's files. They had nothing to do with what really mattered. Their affair was irrelevant. With a decisive tap, she deleted both, barely giving them a second thought. Her eyes lingered on Sarah's file next. A moment of hesitation passed, her finger hovering over the send button. Then, with an aggressive tap, she sent the file directly to William Mercer and Carla Donovan. She didn't flinch. David's file was next. A sinister smirk curled on her lips as she clicked send, forwarding the information to William Mercer without a second thought. Finally, she focused on Clint's files. She hovered over the one containing all the work-related dirt, embezzlement, fraud, and misuse of company funds. With a dismissive flick, she deleted it. Her gaze sharpened as she moved to the second file, the fake evidence that implicated Clint as an informant for the police, a lie that could bring the wrath of the Emerald Society crashing down on him. Gwen stared at the screen for a long moment. Then, without sending it, she shut her laptop. Calmly, she packed up her things, ready to leave for the day. As Gwen left Code Light, She crossed the street to a nearby convenience store. Making her way behind the building, she found an open dumpster. She removed the hood of her hoodie and pulled off a long black wig, revealing her natural short black hair with red highlights underneath. Next, she unclipped her student ID, which read Gwen Norton, and tossed both the wig and ID into the dumpster. With a quick glance around, she headed toward the bus stop, blending into the crowd. The next day, David arrived at work, confusion settling in as soon as he stepped through the entrance. At the receptionist's desk, Linda looked up and said, "You need to go to Human Resources immediately." Unsure of what was happening, he made his way to the HR office where he was greeted by the Human Resources manager, Lisa Grant. Her expression was serious as she gestured for him to sit. Without delay, she opened a file on her desk and began showing him the documents that had been sent by Raven 404. David's heart sank as he processed the information. "You're fired," Lisa stated flatly. "Please turn in all your company's security cards." David barely had time to react before he was escorted out of the building, a sinking feeling of dread filling him as he realized the gravity of his situation. That same day, Sarah arrived at work, only to be intercepted by Lisa Grant the moment she stepped into her office. "You're wanted on the upper floor by William Mercer himself," Lisa said, her tone leaving no room for questions. Feeling a knot of anxiety in her stomach, Sarah made her way to the top floor of Code Light. As she entered William Mercer's office, she was met with his stern gaze behind the desk. Carla Donovan stood beside him, arms crossed and expression unreadable. A third figure in the room introduced himself as FBI Agent Josh Williams. "We need to talk," he said, his voice steady. "I have some questions about these files," he added, pulling out the documents sent by Raven 404 and laying them on the desk in front of her. Clint returned to work, hearing all about Sarah and David getting fired, but nothing happened to him. For the next 3 days, he went about his routine, wondering why Raven 404 had exposed Sarah and David but left him alone. After all, he was the worst offender. He convinced himself that because he had told the truth, Raven 404 must have forgiven him and deleted his file. On the 4th day, Clint left a donut shop not far from Code Light. As he walked down the sidewalk, munching on his donut and heading toward the parking lot, he thought about Sarah's legal troubles and how easily he could have been in her position. Finishing his donut just as he reached his car, he unlocked it with his key fob and approached the driver's side door. But as soon as he placed his hand on the door handle, the back door of a black cargo van parked right next to his car slid open. A massive man, around 6 feet 6 inches and weighing about 270 pounds, with long hair tied back in a ponytail and a goatee on his chin, stepped out. He grabbed Clint from behind and yanked him violently into the van. Before Clint could even react, the van sped away, leaving the parking lot in a rush. The next day, Gwen left her actual internship at Cybernetic Helix, one of the nation's most advanced cybersecurity firms. She stopped at a small sandwich shop near her apartment, ordering a ham and cheese sandwich with a bag of chips and a cola. As she ate, the news played on a TV in the corner, reporting on a man found shot execution style, with 3 bullet wounds in his head and back. The victim was identified as Clint Voss. Gwen glanced at the screen before finishing her sandwich and leaving. Back in her small studio apartment, she kicked off her shoes and sat at her desk, where her large gaming laptop rested. A student ID from Nebula University, bearing the name Amelie Ross beneath her photo, was clipped to the lampshade. She opened a photo folder on her laptop, pulling up an image of Olivia at age 14, with herself at age 11. They were sitting on the beach next to a small sandcastle, Olivia's arms wrapped around her as they smiled for the camera. The caption read, "Family Beach Day, July 18th. She stared at the photo for a few moments, then closed it and launched one of her favorite video games, immersing herself in the digital world.
Looks like Clint's final indulgence was a cream-filled cinnamon donut. What did you think of this episode? If you enjoyed it, give it a thumbs up. If not, the dislike button's always an option. That's all for now. Catch you in the next episode.